Welcome to the ViewPoint. We're here at Inflection Point Ventures, where we believe everyone can grow with startups, talking about startups, a revolution or an illusion. Today, we have two distinguished speakers with us to join and give their insights and their thoughts. Please welcome Prayank Swaroop, partner at Axel. He's been with the firm since 2011, focusing across sectors like cybersecurity, developer tools, and marketplaces. He is from IIT Delhi and is an MBA from ISP Hyderabad. Our other speaker is Mr. Anoop Menon, who is Principals Investment at Chirate Ventures and is sort of representing the consumer tech face for the firm and is an MBA from Indore. Welcome, and I think, sort of throwing it out there really to ask startups. We've heard it all through Shark Tank is sort of a buzzword. But while India ranking number 3 today, number of unicorns and therefore up there, what do we think really of startups? And I think, Prayank, I'm going to throw this at you first, is how do you really see startups when we say that? Is it a bad word? Is it a buzzword, really?
First of all, thanks to you, Ivy, to having me here, and thanks for the IPV team to have me here. The way I'll tell you about it is, let me tell you a story, and it's a little biased because I have just seen a lot of startups happen in front of me. So I was in IIT Delhi, and I was friends with Dipinder Goyal, and my juniors were Sachin Bansal and Binny Bansal, and graduated from college, and they became my flatmates, Sachin and Binny, and then they started Flipkart in the same flat where I lived. And then I went one day to my dad. Sachin and Binny offered, we were like, 7 people living in a 3-bedroom apartment. And they offered to all of us that, why don't you come and join our startup? So the 2 of them offered to 5 of us and thought they were smart people, they're doing something interesting. So I went to my dad and said, I want to join this startup. And my father said, you're getting 5 lakh rupee salary. You're saying you'll go there and you'll get like some 10,000 rupee per month. Are you crazy? Acha kasa job hai. You stay in your job. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so this happened. Then I went on to do my ISBC MBA, and then 1 year later of that, I was living in Singapore, all happy. Then Dipinder called me. I have just raised my seed money from InfoEdge and come and join me. And then I was just married. And then I said, how much money will you give me? And he said, I'll give you 1 lakh rupee per month. Okay, so 10,000 rupee per month had become 1 lakh rupee per month, 10 times more money. And again, I went back, discussed with my family, to be wife. We were already married at that time. And we were like, we are happy in Singapore, right? And then roll forward 2 years later, I came to India. The day I landed in India, I think at that time, just then Flipkart became unicorn around that time. And my father called me, Abhi, Sachin, Binny were your, flatmates. So what are you doing? Then 1 year later or 2 years later, Dipinder had his funding and he became like a $500 million company. And then again, my father called me. Dipinder used to come to our house. What are you doing? Sitting in this VC firm, right? And now what is happening is we are finding, parents are just happy to have their kids do their startup first. So until I became a partner, my father was still after my life. Leave your VC firm. I'll give you money, whatever money you need. I'll get 10, 15. What is your friends and family around? We will get it done. Kuch karte hain. So that is what was happening. So I think it has become a lifestyle now. I think it's a viable career option to have a startup. It's great that as a country, lot more youngsters are wanting to do startups. And I think it's all going towards its progress for the country, I think. So it's a revolution, I would say. Yeah.
Right. No, I think, sort of articulated real simply in terms of how people see it from a really don't touch it as partful versus why are you not in it, right?
Yes.
So I think, Anoop, really for you, given sort of, your move from managing family offices, then actually sort of, working with large companies like Accenture Venture and looking at deep tech, etc., and your experience with AsiaNet, I think sort of your being part of it itself and then moving to being an angel investor, etc. How do you see the evolution personally and then let's say the larger ecosystem?
Thanks again for IPV and Ivy for having us over here. if you just rewinding back to my MBA days, I think one of the reasons why a lot of folks end up taking a career in consulting for one at that time used to be to say, in a short span of time, to get the most rich and diverse experience. I'm just hiring an entry-level analyst associate into the firm. What I see is a bunch of CVs which are coming from the topmost institutes of the country. I don't see big brands anymore. I see startups. I see funds where they're interning. There's a sense that this environment of the venture ecosystem provides a significant level of dynamism, a sort of a hustling attitude, so that in early stages of their career, and even probably that's one of the reasons why I also joined, that I'm able to sort of encapsulate that 10 years or a decades of experience in a short span of time, and work very closely with some of these entrepreneurs who are, full of ideas and energies, and they're, out there to sort of make a mark for themselves. They don't mind failures. They love taking some of these on their stride and moving on to the next milestones. I think that characteristic of what today's young India sort of represents, I think that's what I wanted to be a part of. And that's where the transition of trying to bring what I learned through large corporate experience, family office, and probably even my personal investing experience down to an institutional fund like Chirate, which is a 16-year-old firm, and sort of come in as a principal there. I think it's been a great journey so far. And again, taking on from what Prayank mentioned, kuch karke dekhte hain, right? That kuch karne ka keeda today, effectively with the startup being now a sort of a big buzzword, is there with many of the, not only youngsters, but probably a lot of the other age segments as well, because they have all experienced what they can do in their regimental life, but now they want to come out and try and do something innovative.
Right. Look, I think what I really loved is the fact that you said, one is the millennials wanting to try so many things, but there is no longer the focus of brands, right? I want to be having a big brand name on my thing. If I've got to experience, even if it is at smaller funds, etc., the ability to experience more. And I think you're effectively then talking a little more of the evolution of the ecosystem itself, right? So with that, I'm going to sort of segue into the next question, which really is that if we were to look at Silicon Valley really as our reference point, right, that we're talking tech, and if I may say true tech from that standpoint, but there's an ecosystem, there's universities, and then, there's incubation really. I guess as startup, when we say, is it a revolution, given the institutes that we have in India and parental mindset of what you come out being sort of employable versus, how would you comment about the ecosystem, the entire taking it to fruition from when we're just 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds?
It's a mixed bag, honestly. I think there is a journey which the Indian education system itself is today going through in terms of making it more realistic, more application oriented than just remaining at a theoretical sort of a level. But having said that, deep science, deep tech needs that level of research and academic foundations to be laid. If you look at how in the United States and many other ecosystems where academic orientation is significantly strong or engineering orientation is significantly strong, you will find a lot of innovation happening around these institutes quite a bit. India is now starting to see signs of that. Fantastic ecosystem being built around, say, IIT Madras, a great ecosystem being built around IIT Mumbai. So we are seeing signs of that. But is it today a sort of an all-encompassing, and is there enough support system at different stages of that journey for that entrepreneur who takes that dive into that ocean? Probably not yet. I think that's where, and probably we all need to play a role as investors to sort of provide that risk capital and also allow larger agencies, which could be the government or government-funded organizations, to sort of step in to bridge that gap of capital and risk capital and returns, so that then there is an ability to take a risk, monetize and commercialize some of those innovations and take it to market, right? So we are in a journey. I think it's just been probably Prayank has been there for longer periods of time, but this is just about second or third decade, just about entering, coming close to a third decade of this, venture pool, probably 2 decades solidly of this. So early days, I would say, but right steps being taken.
Sure. So, Prayank, maybe because he's also directed at you, given that you've seen product companies at Adobe, you've seen it from, let's say, banking and Standard Chartered, right? The question really is that when we talk ecosystem players and government, for example, right? Actively or passively, what are your thoughts in terms of them as a stakeholder and how it's evolved, especially given your focus around cybersecurity, maybe even marketplaces, etc.
I mean, it's a very pertinent question. Like, actually, right now, for example, I'm spending a lot of time on artificial intelligence, and people are starting to discuss whether India should have its own LLM, India should have its own GPT, for example, right? And who will give money for that? Should a VC do it? If VC does it, he'll be doing it for profit. But shouldn't it be like UPI? Because actually UPI and Aadhaar are great products sponsored by the Indian government. They have essentially they have created waves of fintech in India, right? So it's a great example of a public good which was created by the government, and it is essentially solving all our lives. And and I mean, there was a discussion yesterday which was with Sam Altman as well, that like a lot of government officials were present in that meeting, and they were asking this question that should we look at AI almost like a nuclear power that each country should have its own, right? And I think the government does play a very important role. I mean, the government, if they can sponsor something like this AI for India, and then suddenly India has its own thing and launch bid for a lot of startups, that'll be amazing. I think one of the spaces where all VCs invest in India, like space tech. And space tech is invested in India because we have a very strong space industry, and that's because the government initially created ISRO, and it was a lot of IIT Madras is very close to ISRO, and so many innovations came out of there that we have so many companies coming out of there. So definitely, government and educational institutes play a significant role in the innovation and tech industries coming out of it. Right? I mean, I was not a great student in college. Either college. I went to 2 colleges, and what I realized was that the era of maybe a lot of startups, if you look today, which are big in India, were not built on deep tech. They were built on roti kapda makan kind of tech. But I think the era of very deep tech companies is coming. You will have to have deep differentiation on technology, and I think that we will then start mirroring the Silicon Valley time at that time, because their fundamental technologies on fiber led to internet, on all of those things, right? So something similar is going to happen in India, I believe, and I think science-based innovations and technology are going to create the differentiations and moats on which large companies are going to build. It is not going to be any longer, the cheapest cost of delivery and the like, right? Yeah. So I think that will change.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what's happening right now is, we've sort of now, like you said, right, second decade, third decade, we've seen, it's almost like some of the investors are like, we've seen that what's new, what's out there really. And to your question of, however, it's like, between a rock and a hard place. You want to see something new, but then it's so new that, do you actually put your foot out there is where it is. And here, maybe, Anoop, question, because you have experienced media from that perspective, that, sort of the role of media from that standpoint as well, this revolution versus illusion.
No, sure. Because you mentioned media, obviously the recent wave of Shark Tank induced euphoria around this entire space. Or euphoria may be a little bit harsh, I would say, but at least acceptance of this as a career option, this as a viable way of building businesses, or choosing a career around some of these, is sort of something which I think at least today a large part of India at least understands it's out there, right? But yeah, the role of media has always been to amplify and bring context to some of these inflection points that happen in the course of a journey of either an enterprise or India as an overall economy. To that extent, when you see a company X getting funded, X billion dollar valuations being talked about, people don't necessarily understand the context in which some of this is happening, right? I think the role of media is to sort of bring that ability of context around some of these. Yes, you will always find a few who do that in a truthful, honest, and deep research-based manner. Some who will just sort of report the entire thing as an event, and hence probably not backed up with certain facts. And that's where I think the gap sort of creeps in. But I think media overall today, and we go back to some of our own research about what's happening in the space. Finally, 40 to 45 billion dollars of revenues that this entire venture ecosystem in India is sort of creating in FY22, FY23, cannot be brushed aside. It's today an engine by its own, which needs its due recognition. It finds its place in definitive conversations around business and economy. And hence you will see more and more government stakeholders, public stakeholders, all of them sort of coming in to set certain guardrails, boundaries of how that community of venture can actually integrate into the larger consumption story which is there in India as well. So yeah.
Right. No, I think that also then helps, sort of Prayank, to lay the base for the next question, which is really that, much of quota statistics is always 90% of startups fail.
Yeah.
70+% never even see Series A, and all of the statistics. I guess, and you referred to it when you said there's ecosystem build up. It still has to get to that certain inflection point. There has to be a ecosystem that will help increase success rate really. But I guess while it's inherent to the nature of startup itself, I guess your comments, especially as we at India are starting to be more open to deep tech, how do you think about failure rates?
Okay, so I'll intertwine this with my journey as an investor. All right. When I started investing, so the first fund I started investing, I invested in 5 startups. Out of those 5 startups, 4 failed. Okay, so they shut down within like 2 years. And then the interesting story is, so at Axel, one of our senior partners, used to play this game with us. He'll say, okay, you really like all your companies, but you pick one company and you say, which of these will become really big? So one of my companies, and he asked all of us, I was a VP at that time, and so 3 of us wrote one company of ours and said, in my portfolio, this company will be like huge. So the other 2 VPs, they, now partners, Abhinav and Bharat, they wrote like, my company will be 200 million. The other guy wrote like, my company will be $500 million. I wrote my company will be 10 billion, right? And then 1 year later, that company shut down, right? So I think failure is definitely part of the story. And I keep reminding themselves, whenever we invest, we think it's going to be very big. But it also tells you something about my maturity. So second fund, I again invested in 5 startups. 3 of them shut down. The third fund, I again invested in 5. I think in 6 startups, 5 of them are there still. Okay, 1 got sold, so it didn't shut down. So I think so. The good part is the way I reflect on it is maybe I'm improving a little bit in my judgment of where to invest and how to invest. Similarly, I think founders go through a learning curve. We've seen now founders who are on their 2nd or 3rd startup. I think a great example is like Swiggy, Sri Harsha. He's mentioned his first couple of ideas didn't work out, and that's when he started doing Swiggy, and it has worked out well. I think startup founders also go through a maturity curve. They have to learn what works, doesn't work, what works for them, how to hire people, how to manage, how to grow. So that is the second piece. They also, and look at India's SaaS ecosystem. We started off where people used to only sell like services outside of India. Then it became products outside of India through Google. Then people started doing inside sales. And now we are hiring folks in US to sell software. And that's a new pattern, right? So now people are learning, how do I manage a team sitting in US while I am in India? I am not able to, a lot of Americans are not willing to join Indian SaaS startups because they don't know whether it's an Indian company. So we are going through those challenges and growing pains. And as an ecosystem, we are learning and maturing. And SaaS Bhumi is a great example where senior founders or experienced founders in SaaS are telling other founders, see, this is how you do it. And I think that's how the ecosystem matures. And that's how all of us learn, right? I am an engineering graduate. When I joined VC, I had no idea of how businesses work. I have learned, and then I have started investing in cybersecurity like 4 years back. I did not know anything about cybersecurity. I learned by meeting entrepreneurs. I learned by meeting the government officials. What are your problems, customers? And I matured. My first cybersecurity investment might not be so great, but I think my fifth or sixth might be better.
Right.
So that's the way
It's a
it
journey.
works. That's a journey I think we are
Right.
all of us on.
Right.
Artificial intelligence, everybody is trying to figure out what it is,
Yeah.
what it is, what
Yeah.
it is. And I think 1 year from now, we'll have better AI startups from India.
Yeah.
2 years from now, we'll have, hopefully, in a couple of years, we'll have a unicorn of AI.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll
Right.
see. That's
So, Anoop, I think, like Prayank talked about it and said, it's evolution, it's journey, it's learning. Again, going back to our theme, right, in terms of adding to the flavor or not, how do you think about founders in general and sort of lending themselves, their aura to this entire brand imagery of startup and the startup ecosystem, really?
The best founder, in my view, would be a person who is able to sort of wear a sort of a helicopter kind of play a helicopter kind of a role, right? Zoom in, zoom out.
Right.
Sees the micro picture, is extremely hands-on,
Right.
and is able to sort of architect that on a tech, but is also able to sort of lift oneself up
Right.
some 10,000 feet and then sort of see the larger picture and build towards that end goal
Right.
as such. Those kind of people, because you're going to hire and work with the best of talent, are going to be the people who will rub off their vision, their thoughts, their charisma
Yeah.
on that team,
Right.
right? And like you had a PayPal mafia, you do now have a Flipkart mafia, right, of sorts. You do have people who come out of these large institutions today and whom many of the investors are willing to back because they've gone through that rigor. They know how it is, how to bake that 0 to 1 journey with higher probability of success, right? It's not that they won't fail, but at least their chances of success are a little bit more higher because they've seen that playbook play out. So and today, as these companies sort of scale and grow, and being in an Indian market, I'm leaving SaaS aside, they will look to sort of probably at eventuality look to go public in a country like India, right? They will get listed here eventually. We had some 6 or 7 of these venture-backed startups sort of going IPO in 21, 22, and many more to come. Many more are lined up. The kind of personality that a founder should have to handle a public listed organization, those skill sets are different. You will find many of them today learning that from probably their seniors. Probably it was the services set of tech folks, right, who went public in probably 3 decades back. You will find a lot of that happening as well, where you will learn how to become a public listed company's chairman or CEO of sorts. So that's a journey and a sort of a process which every founder will go through and sort of also decide what kind of talent, what kind of team that do they sort of groom and bring up so that they can be successful at different junctures in that part. So I think they play a great role. Many of them are active on social. Many of them openly talk about their successes and failures. It's a great learning for the new bunch of folks who are coming up as well. And I find them quite receptive to also engaging with the community and sort of as, again, Prayank mentioned the SaaS Boomi equivalent. So there are many such smaller micro ecosystems forming in the country.
Yeah, but I disagree with 1 or 2 points, which is, I think, if you take examples of large companies in India, and I'm speaking from the sense of Indian consumer, my sense is the company brand should become bigger than the brand of the entrepreneur.
Sure.
And like if you look at Tata's, Tata's name is trusted by everybody, or Reliance, the name of the company comes first, and then because your company has been there for a very long time, then the founder gets known. I think our ecosystem, there has been like few cases where some founders have become much larger than life compared to their companies. Might be good for them, but I think till your company has gotten to a sustainable stage, it has proven that yes, it is going to be there for the long term. I think every founder should just put their head down and focus on the company. Yes, if you, by having some persona, if you can hire the best people, then you should probably cultivate it. I think a founder's time is well spent in building the company. I think a good point is like this. I think 31st December 2022 was the first time Sri Harsha of Swiggy, he actually came on Twitter and is like, let me figure out how to do this thing. right? But the last so many, like half a decade or more, you're just building that company. And I think company building is so hard, and maybe particularly so hard in India. Like I say, you need support of your customers, of your family members. बीवी का साथ चाहिए, ससुर जी का साथ चाहिए, government का साथ चाहिए, everybody का साथ चाहिए. So it's very hard to build a company. It's not easy, and I think being on any social media platform is a distraction. Like even like I don't like to be on any social media platform, though my marketing team keeps telling me you have to keep your brand out there, and we are doing this podcast, so all of us are doing marketing.
Yes.
But so if the business requires it, then do it.
Right.
But most businesses don't require you to be in social media. In fact, your customers don't care where you should be engineered towards your customers and your employees,
right,
rather than anything else.
Right.
Is the 2 cents I would put forth.
Sure. So, Anoop, I know we heard Prayank a lot on founders, what they can, cannot, should not, to that extent, overpower the brand, if I may say. But I guess simply from startups and really managing from that perspective, there's always been this conversation of let's domicile out of India, because India is just so difficult. And you said that it's so difficult to run a business in India. While it's gotten better, it's still not there yet. We're seeing a lot of reverse flipping. It comes with a large cost. But I think real comment really as early stage and as founders are setting up, how do you think they should think about that?
One of the key aspects to think about in terms of where you want to be eventually is where you think you will end up building your business towards, where your customers are. I think ideally give the comfort to the customers of where you're going to be domiciled. I know for many companies it's an evolution. It's not on day one that you will know where is that market fitment going to happen. But at least at different junctures of this journey, if you're able to sort of look very closely and say where is that customer company fit, I think that's where you should ideally be. Yes, in today's world, because there is a certain sense of agility and a certain sense of ease of doing business, factors which sort of plays in capital flow related requirements in the global pictures. It does form a consideration set, but I think the stakeholders around the table, if you're able to convince in terms of this basis, I think it should be a fair conversation. Things are getting better in India, so you will find a lot of companies which were looking to sort of start up, say in a Singapore or a Dubai, or probably in, again, enterprise tech SaaS world, it's very clear in US. But at least for the other geographies where they were immediately trying to set up, I think there is a reconsideration on that in terms of how India itself has sort of evolved. Now you do have an offshore sort of a facility out here as well. Could potentially look to leverage it after things sort of streamline. It's still work in progress on that front.
Right. Yeah. So maybe Prayank, your thoughts on that as well, right? When we talk GIFT City, etc. Really, in terms of the earlier infrastructure and ecosystem play, your thoughts on that?
I think, like Anoop mentioned, I think in India, the legislation, the MCA, the SEBI are doing a great job now. The streamlining is becoming better and better. There was when I joined VC industry a decade back or so, at that time there was this whole paradigm that you should set up your company outside of India because it is easier for getting acquired. It is easier for getting, you like do an IPO outside of India, not in India. I think both of them have been proven wrong, those hypotheses, because as you can see just from the recent, stories, PhonePe has flipped back to India. I think I'm hearing stories. I don't know whether Razorpay has already flipped back to India or not. But essentially, the paradigm that you can't go IPO in India because India is a small market cap market, very liquidity market. I think that has been disproven. The IPOs of Zomato, Policybazaar, Paytm, all of them have proven that there's enough depth of investors willing to put money in Indian companies. The Indian retail market is willing to participate, and these companies are better served in India than outside of India in the Indian public market. So that, I think, for that reason alone, you should be here. And like Anoop mentioned, your customers are here. You're making money here, and so customers are willing to put. So I think you should be here. So that's one. Second was, it is if you're sitting outside of India, and I think it was a group think. you're domiciled out of India, it's easier to get money from international investors and the like. I think a good company, whether they are domiciled in India or domiciled outside, will always get money, is what I've learned over the last 12 odd years. Like I'm on board of Zetwork. We had this big debate, but I think everybody, like, if you're doing well, I mean, investors will come put money in India. I think there are certain challenges will continue, which I think the government needs to work on, is, how foreign investors take out money, or sometimes there are flip-flops on the rules. I think those are what create unease amongst investors. But I'm sure the government has their own good reasons why they do that. So I think, but like broadly, we are moving in the right direction. So I think, I mean, a founder thinking about setting up in India or outside,
Right.
You should set up in India.
Right.
Yeah.
So, sort of as we move towards wrapping, really, we're saying that really more revolution here to stay is what we're saying. Maybe your sort of closing thoughts, Prayank, on which sectors, I know AI is close to your heart, but
Yeah.
what are the 1-2 sort of areas, themes that's really out there?
So I am going more and more in those areas where you can build a moat. And you build a moat by doing something where you have a technical edge. Your product can't be copied very quickly. So that's the way I think about it. Because also, if you look at the next maybe 5-6 years, easy money is not going to be there. So you can't build a business on negative gross margins, burning cash, is what I believe. A lot of the businesses which have been built in India till now got built because you could get to scale because free money was available, and then you say network effects start kicking in. I think that playbook is probably over. So you have to truly build products which are innovative, and then customers should appreciate and give you money for that. That's the core thesis. Now, having a tech advantage, research-based products is probably a great. So I'm looking all for those kind of products. I think the one place which I haven't, to be honest, so Axel invests in consumer brands and everywhere else. Also, it's just personally I don't understand that space that well, and that's where Anoop can talk about it. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Prayank. I think India's consumption story is going nowhere. I think we're just scraping the surface in that sense. UPI as a platform to facilitate transactions as such is just about 300 odd million people. I think we still have, that's just about 25% of the entire population that we have. But also are the problem statements, right? We still have a billion people who need efficient healthcare, education, access to food and other facilities. So I think as the growth sort of democratizes in terms of overall GDP growth, GDP per capita and all of that, and the spending power sort of improves, I think you will find newer opportunities sort of emerging for the consumption or the consumer tech space to sort of lap into, right? Models will have to be redone. It cannot be the large horizontal marketplace just serving, in a one-size-fits-for-all kind of a mechanism, right? There are companies who have tried different models. They're going through a sort of pivots and changes. You will find some innovation happening there for sure. So we're extremely bullish on the consumption story as such. But as Prayank mentioned, you need to build your own moats through a certain verticalization or backward integration. So as long as you have as much control to certain products and building certain technology moats around those product journeys, or it can go down right up to a material design, chemical, re-engineering of sorts to come up with products in the consumer space, which probably will, sort of suit that particular audience. I think that's where we are sort of tending towards. So extremely bullish as sector. So while these are broad themes that we play on, the fact that brands definitely again something that we are really looking forward to, and the next wave of e-commerce that could come up and expand this current penetration levels to a healthy double-digit penetration in the e-commerce space is something that we are very closely tracking. Not to mention, I think in the immediate short term, you will find significant amount of innovations happening around the India's own public goods stacks, right? Each of those stacks are going to sort of lend itself into innovations. Entrepreneurs are going to build on top of ONDC, on top of OKEN, on top of the NDHM platforms which are coming up, and sort of trying to innovate on those public goods platforms. So those are things which we are watching out for, and would love to again stay connected.
I just wanted to expand a little bit on the consumer side. I think it might be useful for the startups. So what I have realized is India has very short of quality supply. So, when urban companies started, they started off by saying we will help people find the next plumber and electrician and carpenter. And then they quickly realized that the quality of service they can't guarantee. So they need to go hire those people on their own payroll, train them, and then that's when urban company differentiated themselves, right? If you look at Swiggy, Instamart, it's what you're saying. It's like their own product almost, which they're selling quality, so that they can assure quality of service.
Okay.
I think in India, all customers are value conscious, and they value, like they know they want quality of service, right?
Okay.
So that's where if you could start doing things, I think from that perspective you're right, and that is the hard part. Because building that requires a lot of effort, a lot of energy. You can't just say, I'll just buy from here.
It's not trading.
It's not trading.
It's not trading. Yeah.
Correct. So I think that you're bang on. And I think the second point which you made of Oken and UPI and Aadhaar and other stacks, that's the other interesting bit. I think anytime there is like a regulatory change or overhang, which new things come, that's an opportunity for startups to build as for India, for sure. And then the third is basically the technology disruption. Like AI is suddenly something inflected, and then you build something around that. So regulatory change, technology disruptions, or just bringing completely new thought process into the market which exists. You see that. I think those are the three areas which provide opportunities to build. Companies.
So.
No, thank you so much. I think, Anoop, I do want to sort of quote you. You mentioned, I think, in one of your posts, money everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And therefore, the analogy to funds and availability, because startups ask us that, other investors ask us that, right? That, is there money, funds out there? For me, really, sort of putting it together, thank you so very much for, I think, your experiences, your views. But I think for me, the message truly is that it is still in the making and tending towards revolution for sure. I think a lot of the ecosystem play, and therefore opportunities galore, because I think that last example of quality, that itself is potentially a moat, right? While we may not necessarily think of that. And then of course, deep tech, and looking at the areas that there still is a need for the 1 billion plus that we have simply within the boundaries of the country itself. So thank you all very much. I think a very, very sort of insightful session for me as well, and hopefully for all of our viewers. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.